the keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm going to be talking about wild card 49ers players. And you might be asking yourself, what exactly does that mean? Well, that is players that I believe are wild cards to where if they hit, they're going to change the game. If they don't, the 49ers might be in a little bit of trouble. That's how important these guys are, that they are very successful. And for some of these, it's going to be homegrown talent. For some of it's going to be players that they added through free agency. But the 49ers are coming into a different time for this roster than they've had in a little while. Right now, they're having to recalibrate. They're having to bring players in, and they're expecting a lot out of these players. But with all things, you just don't know for sure what you're going to get. For every guy that you have come in that's a superstar, you have somebody else come in that underperforms. Maybe gets injured, doesn't meet expectation. We all remember how important it was when Dee Ford came from Kansas City and the impact that he had on the early parts of the 2019 season. But the injury that he had definitely changed everything. So you have to take into account that some things are going to change, but this is a wild card opportunity for the 49ers. And they are betting on some guys, and they're betting on some guys big. They're betting on young players. They're betting on free agents. They're betting on guys that they've been developing to now step into their spot and shine. It is time for some guys to elevate their game. They've been waiting for their opportunity, and they've had success at this before. Talanoa Hufanga was a safety in waiting, a wild card player at one point in his career. What we saw his rookie season, what were we going to get out of the next year? We saw inconsistencies. Well, guess what? When he stepped in as a full-time starter, he became an all-pro. We've seen this with other guys. Fred Warner had flashes in 2018, but in 2019, he stepped in and assumed the number one linebacker role, even when they brought in Quan Alexander, and he became a wild card player that hit. We've seen this time in and time out, even on the offensive line with guys like Aaron Banks, who stepped in for Laken Tomlinson, and in my opinion, outplayed Laken Tomlinson when Aaron Banks first stepped in that first year. So wild card players has worked for the 49ers. Guys who this is the whole plan, to get them in there and let them make an impact. And yes, they can change the game. And it's also not worked. And this is a tried and true method around the league. Draft and develop, bring in key free agents at particular spots and let them succeed. But if these guys don't hit, your team struggles. If they do hit, that's the difference between potentially going 10-7 and maybe 13-4 and having an opportunity to have home field advantage and go to a Super Bowl that's going to be played inside the friendly confines of Levi Stadium. So these players hitting is significant. So I want to go through a list, talk about wild card players that the 49ers need to hit during this season and whether I think they're likely to or not likely to. And I think we're just continuing the conversation about this 49ers roster because I think it's very important for these guys to step up. And there's some guys on the list that I think you are going to agree need to make plays for the San Francisco 49ers team this year. And I think it's a little bit more than just they need to step up, but they've got to play well or this team is going to go in a different direction. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Give me a 5-star rating. That would be wonderful. I really appreciate it. If you don't feel that I deserve it yet, hey, take your time, listen to some more content, and then decide. But I really appreciate everyone that gives the 5-star reviews. It goes a long way and helps my channel get out there to more and the content get out there to more people. So I really appreciate it. And, of course, if you are going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, we're deep into the NBA and NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We keep the dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything. with updated odds on Major League Baseball, UFC, and boxing to Tennessee and NFL futures. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. So I want to start with positions that the 49ers are going to need starters. And I think that it's interesting that you're coming into a season where you've got to figure out so many starters, both on offense and defense. And I think offense is a little bit easier. There's really one position per se you need a starter. I think when it comes to wide receiver, you do need guys that are going to step up, right? I just did a breakdown over on Patreon of Demarcus Robinson and his impact of what he's going to do for the San Francisco 49ers offense. And so if you like Patreon, link is in the description section. You can go over and watch my breakdowns on all the players the 49ers have been adding. I consistently have been adding to the library. There's also standalone videos where I do my predictions on how many games the 49ers are going to win this season, what the toughest games in the schedule are going to be. Sorry, small little plug for Patreon. But that's all available over there. So I was talking about Demarcus Robinson, and I think he is a wild card. But there are players on this team that are having to step into starting roles, and some of them might even have played that starting role already, but they didn't play it to a high enough level to where you feel, hey, this guy is ready to roll. But if he is ready to roll, he changes the game, right? The 49ers had this, like I talked about with Fred Warner stepping in 2019. They paid a lot of money to bring in Quan Alexander. Then they drafted Dre Greenlaw. And Fred Warner stepped into his own. Dre Greenlaw became, one of the best rookie linebackers 49ers have had, not named Patrick Wilson, Navarro Bowman, but a really talented football player, and the rest was history. So it does happen, right? Nick Bosa also contributed. So rookies can be a big part of the contribution in their rookie season. In fact, almost every team needs rookies, to step up and make plays. Just look at what happened last year with Philadelphia. They were counting on young cornerbacks, and it worked. Guys like Cooper DeJean were out there making plays. So rookies are expected. I mean, just look at the 1994 49ers. You might say, hey, look at all the talent that they had on that football team. Lots of veterans. They brought in veterans all over the place. They had a rookie linebacker starting in Lee Woodall. So it's not all veterans. Young guys have to step up if you're going to be able to make an impact. But the number one guy for me that's a wild card is Ji'Ayir Brown. And the reason that I say that is the 49ers have invested a lot of draft capital over the last 3 years in safety, bringing in 3 safeties over the last 3 years, Ji'Ayir Brown being the first one. Then they brought in Malik Mustafa, who's going to be out with injury early. And then they brought in Marquise Siegel this year. But Ji'Ayir Brown being successful this year is going to be very important to the 49ers' success. They need help in the back end when it comes to safety. And they've brought in a couple of guys to help with that. Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock. Those guys are going to be very important as well. But Ji'Ayir Brown needs to hit because the 49ers don't have enough when it comes to the safety position to replace him right now with Malik Mustafa being hurt. Malik Mustafa's injury did not afford Ji'Ayir Brown the opportunity to not hit in a positive direction when it comes to that wild card. He needs to be a reason the 49ers are more successful. He needs to be a reason that the 49ers have plays being made in the back end. He needs to not miss tackles anymore. But the 49ers are betting on their young safeties to step in. Even a Pinnock is only 25 years old. Even a Richie Grant is a young player coming off his first contract. They're investing in young players and trying to see what can happen. But Ji'Ayir Brown's impact on this 49ers could be felt early because they need to be better at run fits. And they've invested so much when it came to the front and the defensive line, the linebacker room where they keep investing in linebackers, and then the back end when you're talking about safety and corner. And last year, the safeties, minus Malik Mustafa, really let the 49ers down. They weren't consistent making those tackles. They weren't consistent in coverage. And the 49ers really struggled when it came to stopping offenses, especially on that third level. So Ji'Ayir Brown's impact on this team is going to be very significant. And I do think that they've brought in players just in case that Ji'Ayir Brown's not going to be that guy. But they are heavily invested in Ji'Ayir Brown. And I think that if he hits and he's able to play the way that Robert Saleh sees him potentially playing, he can flip the script. He can change the direction of the season in a big way. because if he shores up those things and we start seeing more positives that we saw from his rookie season, he's going to stabilize that back end, and he's going to make it easier when the 49ers are waiting for Malik Mustafa to come back. So this is a very huge one that the 49ers definitely need to go their direction. Another wild card player for me is D. Winters. And, it's interesting when the 49ers drafted Nick Martin, right away the conversation shifted, and it wasn't so much here, but the conversation shifted right away to Nick Martin is the starting will linebacker day one. And I get it. He was drafted in the 3rd round. He's, got a lot of athleticism. He goes on shows and he says, hey, I plan on starting right from the beginning. And I love that, that about him, kind of the confidence to say, hey, I'm going to go out there and start. But D. Winters has been floating under the radar, and I get it. Last year, he dealt with some injuries. He wasn't able to take away the will linebacker's spot from a guy that didn't deserve to be on the field, especially down the stretch where he quit on his football team, number 59. And I think that D. Winters is now coming into a position where he sees someone get drafted at his position, somebody that's a lot like him. Nick Martin and D. Winters are not that much different when you're talking about athletic profile, the way that they play the position, the fact they both came from the Big 12. Like, there is a lot of similarities between the two guys. Now, D. Winters has played in this system for 2 extra years, so that makes it a little bit easier for him as he's had to work his way up from a backup who helped on special teams to a Sam linebacker to an occasional will linebacker last year to now the presumed starter at will linebacker. And I think that that's one thing that we have to remember is, Nick Martin is drafted, but I think D. Winters is sitting there too, like, hey, I'm pretty good too. And Robert Saleh had some very nice things to say about D. Winters in the presser when they asked how he felt about him. And he talked about the fact that, he thought that as long as he kept up with what he was doing, and he stayed in line and he kept learning and he kept progressing and he kept being intentional with every single rep, that he was going to have a really good season. And I thought that was a Robert Saleh way of not exactly crowning him as a starting linebacker, but tipping the cap to the work that D. Winters has put in and saying, hey, kid, if you keep doing that, you are going to be a starting linebacker on this football team. And I think you look at the numbers on PFF of what D. Winters was able to do in coverage, and I think you're hyper excited about the fact that he has a 70 coverage grade. That is something that Devondre Campbell really struggled with last year. And in fact, the 49ers had struggles with most linebackers not named Fred Warner and D. Winters when it came to coverage. So I think that this is a big one too, because there is a element to this linebacker room that we're wondering how it's going to be filled. And part of that is energy. Part of that is communication because Dre Greenlaw leaves. And Dre Greenlaw's impact on this team is more than just what happens on the field, but also the energy he brought, the enforcer mentality he brought. Now, I'm not telling you that D. Winters can bring that type of mentality, an enforcer mentality, but anyone that's watched D. Winters knows he can bring an energy. He hits, he flies around, he makes plays. And Robert Saleh said he's been communicating better than he's ever communicated. So the fact that he's bringing that element to the game, that makes me feel a little bit better. But this is the ultimate wild card for the 49ers. This is the ultimate question mark when you're talking about run defense and just this defensive mentality is going to be D. Winters. Is he able to step up and step into that role and be the coverage guy that Dre Greenlaw was? And in fact, D. Winters has the ability to be a better cover guy than Dre Greenlaw. I don't know if he'll be as good in the run. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but he can make some negative plays, explosive plays behind the line of scrimmage. We've seen him last year flying around, and we're hoping that that's going to be able to translate and extrapolate into more plays for negative plays in the backfield. But this is one of those ones, right? You've got to have this wild card work out. If you don't, you are looking at potentially going with a young player, Nick Martin, or a career backup in Chaz Surratt or Gifford. And I think that you understand that Luke Gifford and Chaz Surratt are going to be nice depth pieces, but you don't want them starting in your lineup. You want this guy to pay off because this is the guy that's got the talent. When you look at the linebacker room, you've got Fred, who's the most talented linebacker in the NFL, bar none, best linebacker, first ballot Hall of Fame linebacker. And then you've got two hyper talented athletic linebackers in D. Winters and with Martin. And you need these guys to step up and make plays. D. Winters has to step into that role and be a consistent will, so that way Martin can develop as a player, go through the process that D. Winters did. And I think Martin, his development's going to be accelerated. I think he's going to be the Sam backer this year, unless Tatum Bethune can beat him out. But D. Winters, absolute wild card, has to hit. When the 49ers are playing that card, it needs to change in a positive direction for the 49ers. So that's going to be huge. Jason Pinnock, and this is an addition to the team, but with the injury to Malik Mustafa, Jason Pinnock needs to hit. And I know there's other guys, Richie Grant, George Odom, Marquis Siegel, but I don't want to expect too much out of Marquis Siegel with him coming in as a rookie. I get it. When you're talking athleticism, you talk about him the same way you talk about D. Winters and with Martin as well. These dudes are just absolute quick, right? They're fast. And Marquis Siegel, one of the fastest, a 4.37 40, impressive for a safety, and we're going to expect an impact from him. But early on, and even Matt Mayoko has said this, and I've been saying this since I did a safety video last week. You can go check that out if you want to see the depth chart that I believe it is right now. Jason Pinnock is going to be a starting safety right now for the 49ers next to Ji'Ayir Brown. And I talked about Ji'Ayir Brown just a couple of players ago, the impact that he's going to have. Well, Pinnock is going to have to be a wild card as well. Malik Mustafa wouldn't have been a wild card. We knew what we were getting from him. We knew about the consistency that he was going to be able to hit. But now Pinnock is going to be one of those guys, a veteran presence in that safety room, but a young guy who was drafted by Robert Saleh in New York. So Saleh even said they drafted him as a corner. Now he's going to play safety. Jason Pinnock needs to be able to step up and make plays. But I don't think that we've seen enough to say like, oh yeah, I've seen something from Jason Pinnock in his career that makes me think he's going to be a stable starter in this league. That's one of the things about these guys. We've seen bits and pieces. We've seen flashes, but we haven't seen a guy that we're like, oh yep, that's for sure a starter. Now, I like Jason Pinnock's game. I like some of the versatility and the way the 49ers are going to be able to use him. He can step up into a slot because of his corner skills and cover a athletic tight end or cover a talented running back. Those are abilities that he has. So I think he has a nice skill set. But to say that he's put it all together to be a starting safety in the NFL, I think that would just be kind of crazy talk. I don't think we've seen that yet. So Jason Pinnock is a real wild card player for the 49ers. They need him to step up. They don't have an answer, right? And you could throw Richie Grant into this. I just think Pinnock is the more suitable to play along Ji'Ayir Brown. I think they are the most compatible teammates to play next to each other until Malik Mustafa comes back. But that is a player whose strengths accentuate the strengths of Ji'Ayir Brown. I don't want to see Ji'Ayir Brown in the slot covering, a tight end. I want that to be Jason Pinnock because he's better in coverage. And so he has to be successful for the 49ers. He has to. This guy has to be able to be successful to bridge the gap until Malik Mustafa comes back. And I would actually argue that Malik Mustafa and Ji'Ayir Brown skill set don't match up as good as Jason Pinnock and Ji'Ayir Brown. So the question will be after that, is it going to be Malik Mustafa and Jason Pinnock? Now that could be interesting. So that's why Ji'Ayir Brown has to step up. If not, the ultimate group for the 49ers, and it might take a year to get there, is Malik Mustafa with Marquis Siegel. I think that those guys really do, fit together as a team. And so I think that that's what they're working towards. But yeah, I mean, the matchups, Ji'Ayir Brown and Jason Pinnock works. Malik Mustafa and Ji'Ayir Brown are very similar. So Pinnock could have a huge impact on this team. It could be very similar to when the 49ers had to bring in Tashawn Gibson and they never put Jimmy Ward back into the safety room. So remember that when we're talking about, these guys and their impact on the football team. Next up is Ben Bartch. And I think it's interesting that we are just comfortable with Ben Bartch being the starting left guard. I mean, I think that last year we saw like a game and a half of him playing left guard, and everyone was like, the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, and everyone's like, oh, like pointing at him, like, hey, here he is. He's the guy. And I think that when you look at his abilities, he's definitely got the ability to play within the 49ers system. They've developed him from taking him from the Jacksonville Jaguars practice squad, signing him, and then continuing to work with him to get him to a point where he could be starting caliber. If you look at his development, it's very similar to Jake Brendel. Now, Ben Bartch, the only thing with him is he did start games with Jacksonville. Jake Brendel was pretty much a career backup until he came to the 49ers, but lots of time on practice squad, Bartch time on practice squad, developmental, took a long time to get into, an opportunity like this to potentially be a starter. I think that this is one that has to hit, and I think that this is a absolute wild card because we're going off of 1.5 games of seeing what he could do out there. And I don't think that that's a big enough sample size to completely write home that, yeah, Ben Bartch is going to be that guy. I have been saying, though, that I do believe Ben Bartch is the most consistent of the interior offensive linemen that are up for that position, right? I've talked about the fact that, now that they've moved Spencer Burford to tackle, he would have been the most talented to play on the inside, opposite of Dominic Pooney. Nick Zakelj is a guy that's very talented. I'm going to do more work on Zakelj. My guy Lou asked me a question about Nick Zakelj. I'm going to be talking about him this week. And in fact, if you have questions that you want me to talk about this week, I'll make a post on YouTube as well. Send them in. Let me know. Email me. It's in the description section. Leave it in the comment section. I'm gonna go through all your questions this week. We're gonna make sure we answer questions. It's a good time of the year to do that. But, Nick Zakelj is a very good pass blocker, and I think that he's better than Ben Bartch pass blocking. He's better than Jake Brendel pass blocking. He's not better than Dominic Pooney pass blocking. Dominic Pooney is the best interior pass blocker on the 49ers, but he is pretty good. It's the run blocking, and we'll see how much that has developed since last year as he has gotten more comfortable with his body and what he could do in the system and the landmarks that he has to reach. He's got the athleticism. He's got the size. He's got the length. But we're talking about, Ben Bartch and Nick Zakelj competing for this position. Maybe Matt Hennessy's in on that as well, but they need Ben Bartch. They didn't have an heir apparent, right? When they were moving on from guys before, they had an heir apparent. You had, Laken Tomlinson was going to move on. They had an heir apparent with Aaron Banks. They were prepared for that. When Mike McGlinchey was leaving, they had an heir apparent prepared in Colton McKivitz. They were ready. Right, they knew that was going to happen. Even last year, the expectation was for John Feliciano to start. They were prepared. They had Dominic Pooney, and even before that, they had Daniel Brunskill was going to be moving on, and they had Spencer Burford ready to go. They have consistently found somebody ready, but usually it was a draft pick. Ben Bartch is not. That left guard spot needs to be shored up. You can't have a run game that only can run to the right. And really, that's not the best way to run anyways, because that's not your best running side. Trent Williams is your best run blocking offensive lineman. You need a very consistent guy on the left side. That was one thing Aaron Banks did well. So Bartch is going to have to hit it. He's going to have to hit it out of the park for this one. Now, next up, I'm going to talk about two guys. And these guys are definite wild cards because I don't think we've seen it for the 49ers in one case. In the other case, it's a young guy who's going to have to step up. But Jordan Elliott, and it's always interesting when I talk about Jordan Elliott on here because I do think that he's, right now, the 49ers have him as a presumed starter. And I think that they expect him, when they move him to 3-tech, to penetrate and make a lot of plays. Last year, he would play 3-tech, but he also played 1-tech or 2-eye. And I don't think that he was as dynamic, especially against duo blocks. That's something he struggled with. He would give up ground. So I think that the 49ers are expecting a lot of Elliott, and they decided to keep Elliott over Malik Collins. They made a decision, we're going to go with Elliott. Now, Elliott was cheaper. Elliott is younger. So a lot of those things play into it as well. But he is also a veteran who's nurturing young players to potentially start along the defensive line with him. So Jordan Elliott's going to be very impactful. He has to be able to hold up. If not, the 49ers are going to have to thrust out there 2 rookie defensive linemen right away. And I think the 49ers would love for it to be one of these guys that start. One rookie defensive lineman to start. And I think they want it to be Alfred Collins. because I think they like the versatility. And listening to Chris Kacerek talk about it in today's NFL, needing to have versatility in the guys that can play both the 2-eye, the 3-tech, the 1-tech, and kind of move around is very important. He also talked about having length playing 3-tech is important. Jordan Elliott, length. Alfred Collins, a ton of length. So I think that is something the 49ers are interested in, with CJ West being a 2-eye, 1-tech this season. And I think that they like that potential of having those guys together. But it all hinges on Jordan Elliott being able to produce. If Jordan Elliott isn't able to be the player that the 49ers think he is, this rotation is going to change because they're expecting him to be a penetrator. Right now, if you look at the abilities of the guys around, we all think Alfred Collins is going to develop into a better pass rusher. CJ West is a effective pass rusher, but I wouldn't say he's a high volume pass rusher. You look at the roster and you're looking for sacks. Besides Kevin Givens, if Jordan Elliott doesn't get it, you really don't have sacks on this team. Evan Anderson's not going to get you sacks. So that is a guy right there in Jordan Elliott that's an absolute wild card on this football team. And a lot of people would rather see Jordan Elliott off the team, but I think it's very important he is on this team because he is a veteran, and you don't want to go wholesale with young players. If you don't have Jordan Elliott, you have on this team, you have 3 penetrators per se. It's Alfred Collins, who hasn't been a sack guy in his career, CJ West, who has proven he can do it, and Kevin Givens, who that's what he is, a sack guy. But he doesn't stop the run as well as Jordan Elliott. Jordan Elliott is a key cog to this 49ers defensive line this year. He's going to be important until these young guys are ready to roll. Now, next year, all bets are off. Jordan Elliott is probably not going to be on this football team, and the 49ers are going to roll with Alfred Collins, CJ West. The young cats are going to be ready to go, invest in more defensive linemen. I think that's, potentially possible. But for 2025, Jordan Elliott's more important, I think, than people believe. He's a wild card, and if he hits and he's able to be successful, and for success for Jordan Elliott, 3.5 sacks on the interior part of the defensive line and being able to hold up against the run and have a better run game than last year is all they need. So that's going to be significant. And I know everyone wants big sack numbers from the interior defensive line, but the 49ers don't need that. They have a NASCAR package. They've added guys like Bryce Huff to the outside and Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos last year who are going to play on the inside and rush on obvious pass down. So you don't need that for sure. A couple more guys before we kind of wrap this thing up is number 1, Trey Brown. And the 49ers drafted Upton Stout. But we've seen the 49ers throughout the last, 4 or 5 years, handful of years, draft guys that they expected to play nickel corner and step in. Whether that was Deommodore Lenoir, wasn't able to step in right away. Samuel Womack stepped in, but then had to be removed and replaced, and that didn't work out. Lenoir ended up going back in there in year 2. And we've just seen this. They constantly bring guys in to potentially play nickel. Last year was Renardo Green. He ended up playing on the outside. I think that worked out well for the 49ers. But in comes Upton Stout, and the 49ers are trying to find their best 3-man corner group. You've got Renardo Green, you got Deommodore Lenoir, you feel comfortable on the outside. But do you have Deommodore Lenoir stay outside? I think it comes down to Trey Brown and Upton Stout, and I don't know what we can expect from Upton Stout. But if Trey Brown's able to play up to the potential that he has and stay healthy, this is a guy that can definitely be a starting caliber cornerback in the NFL. And in that case, it might be Lenoir playing the nickel again with Trey Brown playing on the outside. So Trey Brown's impact, he's a complete wild card. We don't know what we're going to get out of him. If he hits, it's going to be very impactful for this football team. It'll allow Upton Stout more time to develop into a position that's very difficult to play in the NFL, where you have to cover like a corner and you have to stop the run like a linebacker. And I think that's, I hope Upton Stout is the guy, but you need Trey Brown to step up. If not, we can't have the inconsistent play 49ers got from their third corner like they did last year when it was Isaac Yedem or it was Rock Yassin. They competed, they battled, they were good against the run, but it was a little bit of a concern. So that's something to remember when you're talking about corner. They need Trey Brown to be a wild card in a positive way and really hit. And the last one I'm going to talk about, I would normally talk about Jake Moody, but I'm not going to talk about him. Everyone already knows he's a wild card. It's Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff has had 1 year of production in the NFL. And I know Robert Saleh signed off on this, and I listened to what he said at the press conference, and he talked about how he reshaped his body and he learned a different position, and he went out there and competed, and then the success he had in 2023 was because of that hard work, and I am 100% behind that. I was 100% behind this move. I think it does help the 49ers. The best get-off since D Ford is what they're saying. But he's a wild card because they've brought him in now to fulfill a pass rush role, and he has to hit. Because the guys that they have on the defensive line, not named Nick Bosa, are not exactly the best pass rushers from the outside. That's why they went and got Bryce Huff. This was the need. This will open up the 49ers defensive pass rush. I talked about the effects of the D-line. But if Bryce Huff can bring pressure from the outside and allow Yetur Gross-Matos and Mikael Williams to move in on obvious pass downs, this 49ers defensive line goes from being good to being elite. It jumps over great. It goes to elite because this will allow them to put so much pressure on a quarterback. And we want this to look like a jailbreak. Get after the quarterback. And I believe Mikael Williams, because he played 4-eye in college, Yetur Gross-Matos has been used to doing this as well. He's a big individual. I think they can still get pushed on interior offensive linemen if you just want to collapse the pocket. This is one of the most huge moves the 49ers have right here. This is the absolute wild card. If you make the pass rush elite and Bryce Huff is able to be the 2023 version of himself and get 10 sacks opposite of Nick Bosa, and Gross-Matos and Mikael Williams are able to rush from the inside, that will help the secondary. That will help the linebackers. That will help everybody. So I think this is one of the biggest wild cards this entire NFL season for the 49ers is going to be Bryce Huff's impact on their pass rush. And if he hits, the 49ers can go from a team that, yeah, you look at the schedule and it looks very favorable. But there are people that are picking them to go 10-7. If you have an elite pass rush, this is not a 10-7 team. This is a 13-4 team. That's how much of a difference a elite pass rush can make on a defense, getting off the field on third down, creating turnovers, creating impact plays and opportunities, not just for the defense to get off the field, but for the offense to get good field position. So this is a huge impact for the 49ers, and I'm super excited about it. But it hinges on Bryce Huff. And I'm going to bet on Robert Saleh, right? Robert Saleh signed off on this. He loves Bryce Huff. He knows how he developed. I think we can trust Robert Saleh, but it's a wild card. We've got wild cards in the secondary. We got wild cards at linebacker, the defensive line. There are lots of guys. On offense, it's offensive line. Ben Barch. Let me know, who are your wild card players that if they hit, they're going to change this game for the 49ers. They're going to change this season. That's how impactful they could be. Or if they don't hit, it can go the other way. Let me know. Who did I miss? Let me know in the comment section down below. Really curious. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening to audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.